These are all the things we did with the use of force. So the article that needs to be written is not a Mr. X article, it's a Mr. Y. Why in the world did we do this? Thomas Ricks, in his wonderful book, Fiasco, calls this the most profitable decision any American president has ever made. And I, with the possible exception of Madison in the War of 1812, which is, and I don't even want to argue that one, but this is the one decision I just could not understand. And strategically, it's flawed. Every facet of it is flawed.
One final question?
Can I?
Sure.
It's 3 parts, but you can choose which one.
That's a smart move.
If you could elaborate on the cost to U.S. intelligence of not having diplomatic relations with North Korea, or what would be the advantages of having diplomatic relations with North Korea? And then the second question is just, is this argument being made in the intelligence community that it's a shame not to have diplomatic relations with North Korea? And then third, whether a similar argument is being made about Cuba, given that, from what I know from the U.S. State Department's assessment of the threat of Cuba, militarily they're no longer any sort of threat, but they still are recognized as having pretty good intelligence. Providing good intelligence.
Well, let me look at this in terms of North Korea, Iran, and Cuba. Because these are, to me, great examples of the ability of the United States to shoot itself in the foot. The obsession with Castro that's going on for nearly 50 years is just, it's mindless. I mean, you can't explain this anymore. The problem with Iran is now nearly 30 years. And Iran has made attempts, particularly in the early years of the Clinton administration, to invite Chevron in to explore for oil, and the secret negotiations that went on between the CIA and SAVAK, the Iranian intelligence organization, to wrap up the two-bit Communist Party in the 1980s, after the Khomeini revolution. The secret negotiations between Iran and the United States over doing something about the Taliban, and the important role Iran played in the western part of Afghanistan. And then in North Korea, you go back to the Korean War, and now nearly 60 years, a war that's never been resolved. There's still no peace treaty. So it deals to me with the United States propensity, and here I'll let the psychologists try to explain this, because I don't think a mere political scientist can do it. And this is the American fascination with demonizing its opponents. And I think it's probably rooted in the exceptionalism of the period of the founding fathers, because I've been reading more about the founding fathers because it's so discouraging to read about our current leadership. But we had this tendency to demonize and then non-recognize. You know, we did this with the Soviet Union for 16 years. We did it with China for nearly 30 years. Now, the intelligence community can't do anything about that because these are policy decisions. And really, the CIA is prescribed from conducting policy advocacy. That's why I think the work that Paul Pillar did in the white paper was not only unconscionable, it was illegal. He wrote the administration's case to be given to the American people in the Congress with an unclassified paper that was written from the National Intelligence Estimate of October 2002 that was so corrupt. So policy advocacy is something they cannot do. So it's not their argument. Someone's got to come in with a kind of strategic sense that Roosevelt had in the case of the Soviet Union, that Nixon had in the case of China, that Carter finally finished 6 years after Nixon started it. And that kind of strategic mindset is essential, but so much damage has been done to the dialogue and debate in this country, and these issues have become so polarized. I think it's going to take the death of Castro to do something about that, and probably the death of Kim Jong-il to have some success with regard to North Korea. And poor Iran, I think, is going to serve as our enemy for a long period of time, in part because of the confusion of their own leadership. They're partly responsible for this. I'm not putting all the blame on us for this one. But we have certainly mishandled a few opportunities that we've had.
Join me in thanking Dr.